Welcome to the Temp-Taker 3 video training series. This video explains the Holding Zones tab, located within the Process Options section of the software. Before beginning, please ensure that you have watched the video titled Process Options, Holding Corrective Options, as this sequence is required to properly understand the following information. This tab is where you create the various temperature zones that you will require for the items that you have created within your software. This is also the tab where you will assign your previously created corrective actions to the specific temperature zones they belong in. In the previous video, Process Options, Holding Corrective Actions, we described assigning corrective actions to the different items you would temp so that you would only have the appropriate actions to scroll through for when an item was temped outside of its safe temperature zone. And although this is, in theory, true, these corrective actions are actually assigned to specific temperature zones, to which the items themselves are eventually tied to as you build your program. This was explained in this manner as to not confuse you during program setup. With that disclaimer out of the way, let us go over some of the important factors you will need to know before we begin. You will want to create a temperature zone for each area of your kitchen service that requires a temperature to be recorded. Think of different equipment temperature zones as well as different food temperature zones you might require. Now, keep in mind, some food and equipment items share similar safe temperature parameters. For instance, chilled food being held on a sandwich line may be at a 33 to 41 degree range, and for most kitchens, that might be the exact same range of their reach-in drawers and walk-in coolers. Please note that this example shows you why you would actually require two separate temperature zones to be created to separate the equipment from the food. The reason for this is so that the appropriate corrective actions can be assigned to each type of item. For instance, you wouldn't want to choose from corrective actions such as cool down for a walk-in cooler that temped out of range at 52 degrees. You would want to have more appropriate choices available, such as call maintenance. This is important to think of as you design your programming at this stage. To create a new zone, we first click Add New Row, located at the top left side of the screen. A new row will appear, prompting you to type in the name of the zone you are creating. In this example, we will create a hot holding zone to go with the rest of our zones you see on this page. Once the name has been entered, you may now click on the toggle to the immediate right in the column named Enable FMD. FMD stands for False Measurement Detection and is one of Temp-Taker's proprietary security features used for monitoring employee usage of the unit. When toggled on, this system privately monitors an employee who is taking consecutive temperatures of items within this particular temperature zone and will tell you if they are falsifying these temperatures in this part of your kitchen service. Here is an example of how this works. Say we have an employee who is about to take temperatures of a cold holding line at your restaurant, and we will say there are about 20 items in front of them to temp, all residing within this same cold holding zone of 33 to 41 degrees. The employee temps the first item and receives an in-range temperature on the device, and returns to the previous menu where the rest of the items are displayed on the screen. The employee decides now, for whatever reason, to speed up this process by not removing the probe from the initial food item he or she knows is residing in a good temperature range, and then proceeds through the rest of their cold holding program by falsely recording the remaining temperatures. The employee was able to quickly race through their 20 items within seconds, and on the surface appears to have done his or her job correctly, as well as produced perfect results. But once this data is uploaded into the Temp-Taker software, and an admin-level user accesses the Supervisor View Reporting tab, they see each and every time the employee falsely recorded a temperature. This is because the false measurement detection system requires that the temperature probe be removed from each item after temping, in order to realize a specific change in temperature. In this case, adjusting back to room temperature, before being placed back into an item of the same holding zone as the employee was temping. When the probe isn't removed between consecutive in-range temperatures, each of these events will be flagged internally without alerting the employee. Again, this information is only available when viewing the Supervisor Report tab in the Data Reports section of the software. Please also note that this setting should not be applied in areas where you would be temping an item where the room temperature is the same as the food item. An obvious example is when inside of a walk-in cooler. If you are temping individual food items within a cooler or freezer, deactivate FMD and/or disregard any reporting of this event happening, as the probe will not be able to reset between temperatures, due to the ambient temperature of the room closely resembling the temperature of the food item you are temping. Moving on to the right, we now see the zone row splitting into 3 separate sub-rows. These are for the various temp-taking stages of an item assigned to this particular temperature zone. Initial measurement is for the settings associated with the first time a temperature is taken, followed by the available corrective actions you have assigned to choose from if you find that the temp is out of range. The next sub-row down, called First Corrective Session, is for when an item was temped out of range initially and is now being monitored in the corrective session application within the handheld unit. This sub-row has its own specific safe temperature range and customized corrective actions to choose from when you go back to retemp the item while it is in session. Lastly, the final sub-row is called Second Corrective Session, which again has its own customized settings like the previous 2 sub-rows. On our screen here, you will notice that this sub-row is currently grayed out, and that is because this feature has not been activated within the Temp-Taker software. If turned on, the second corrective session is designed to begin if the time limit had expired on an item's initial corrective session. The toggle for turning on second corrective sessions is found in the Holding General tab, located in the Process Options section of the software. Temp-Taker requires you to first set the temperature parameters for the zone's safe temperature range in accordance with that particular sub-row or stage in the temp-taking process. This is done by either using the associated toggle arrows or by clicking your mouse within the adjoined text fields and typing in your selection. For our hot holding zone, we will start with a minimum of 140 degrees to a maximum of 165 degrees. After that, we will assign which corrective actions you would want available to a user if the item being temped falls below the temperature range we've just created. When adjusting which corrective actions to assign, we first mouse-click inside of the sub-row column we are looking to adjust, and are now presented with a new window of options on the screen. At this point, we simply mouse-click on any available action on the left side of this window to assign them to the temperature zone sub-row, and/or click previously assigned items on the right side to remove them. These actions can also be reordered by clicking and holding your mouse's left button down on a given selection, then dragging your mouse up or down to the desired position before releasing the button again. The icons directly to the left of this area will simply sort your choices from A to Z or Z to A by clicking on them. For this example, we will leave the universal choices of Remeasure and Undo in place, and add in Discard and Reheat, as these seem like the most logical choices to use if an item being temped in this zone was below 140 degrees when we tempt it. Once completed, we now move on to assign which corrective actions we would want when an item in this zone temps above 165 degrees. Again, we will leave the Remeasure, Undo, and Discard options, as they are fairly universal in nature. But we now add in an action called Use Serve As Is. This is a good optional choice to have in your programming, as sometimes you will temp an item that was just added to the hot holding line moments after being cooked. These items may be just slightly over the 165 degree mark, yet are perfectly okay to serve. One final side note to mention is to pay attention to your temperature range settings on a first corrective session within a hot holding zone. Because we would be looking for a temperature of at least 165 degrees or higher, we would need to remember to enter those parameters here. A hot holding zone is one of the few zones you could create that would require a different temperature safe zone than its initial measurement. Lastly, you can organize your various rows for easier viewing by placing your mouse pointer inside the gray block at the very left side of any row, clicking and holding your left mouse button, and then dragging the row up and/or down to your desired position before releasing the button again. The various columns of information seen here can also be sorted A to Z by clicking your mouse in the center of the gray-colored title bar, located at the top of each column. A second click will reverse the sorting order from Z to A, and a third click will reset the order back to its original state. Please note that the sorting feature does expand the selection to the other columns on this screen, keeping the rows of data connected at all times. This concludes the training video on the Holding Zones tab, located in the Process Options section of the software. For additional questions, please email info@itdfoodsafety.com or call 321-676-3194 to reach a technical support representative.